Okay, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day. Father, we thank you for the beauty of the world around us, nature, dear Father, that just reminds us of who you are and whose we are. Father, we also thank you for this opportunity to come and gather and gain information. Thank you, dear Father, for sending your servant, Mr. Curtis, to be with us. Father, Billy has been working in the vineyard for a long time, spreading, dear Father, information about Alzheimer's and dementia for some time. Lord, I ask that you will continue to anoint his lips so that he, dear Father, will get the message across. And Father, give people information which can help them to minister to others as well as prepare, dear Father, themselves for what is a possibility in their lives. Father, I ask also that you will be with each person represented on uh, the Zoom this afternoon, as well as those who may be on their way or could not make it. Lord, we pray that your will be done in all of our lives. And we ask these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, so this afternoon, um, as I mentioned earlier, we are focusing on dementia conversations. And our guest this afternoon is Billy Curtis, who is the program director for the Alabama chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And he leads the care and support activities of the chapter, working with volunteers to deliver educational opportunities, as well as he creates support groups and increase dementia awareness across the state. He's a trained research champion for the association, tasked with delivering the most up-to-date information on advancements in treatment and care. And Billy has been working with the Alzheimer's Association for almost 2 years and in nonprofit management for almost 30 years. So I ask of you to not only hear ye him, but also please feel free to jot down your questions so that as we go along, that if any questions come up, that you can be sure to ask them at the end of the presentation. So, Billy, the forum is yours.
Thank you, and it's good to be with your church again this evening. And I think I did the kickoff program we did for this, and y'all have gotten to meet some of our great community educators along the way. But I'm glad to be back in the hot seat sharing with you this evening. We're going to talk about this program we have called Dementia Conversations, and we're going to talk about some of the kind of uncomfortable conversations that we have to have if we're going through a dementia diagnosis with a loved one. And hopefully some of the information and tips that we give will be useful, and there'll be something that that you can use in your life or share with others who are going through this. I'm going to share my screen, kind of follow along with some information. We've got some embedded videos, and I think we're all working. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about this Dementia Conversations program. We're going to focus on three specific kind of conversations that are very common. Going to the doctor, that decision on when it's time to stop driving and all that comes with that, and a little bit on legal and financial planning. But the strategies and approach that we're going to use for all three of these common conversations we have to have can be used for other conversations. The sort of tips and strategies, should apply across the board. Also, I encourage everyone as they're thinking about this, if you're in a situation where you have a loved one, someone you're close to who is looking at a dementia diagnosis, and these conversations need to take place, remember, this person, what is important to them, their likes, who they are as a human being. And so, you can use that information to tailor these conversations in a way to be most effective as you're helping them along through their diagnosis. So we're going to give some tips on how to break the ice and get into these difficult conversations. We're going to talk a lot about planning ahead and building a care team, because we always like to encourage people to think of a care team approach, because providing care for someone with a dementia diagnosis can be a very big burden on caretakers and caregivers. And so we definitely want to have a team approach to do the best job. And we want to give you the opportunity to hear from some people along the way who are dealing with these specific issues, and then some of the resources we have available. As we get into that and we start wondering if someone we care about, someone that we're involved with, a loved one, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, is having cognitive problems, we often come up with lots of excuses why not to have these conversations. We say, oh, there's other people that can help out. Oh, I don't want to step, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to step in beyond my boundaries and into a sensitive area. Maybe there's not even a problem. And then we sometimes meet resistance from the person who is having the cognitive problems because they don't want to be a burden, or they're protective of their boundaries and their space. And so we avoid having these conversations when we really don't need to avoid them. Family dynamics sometimes can make these conversations harder than they need to be. And so that is another challenge, sometimes steering the dynamics of spouses and siblings and children and everyone involved in the process. One of the things we emphasize over and over about these conversations is sooner is always better than later. Yes, they're uncomfortable conversations. They're no fun to have. They're no fun to hear. They're difficult conversations sometimes, but sooner is always better than later. We don't want to wait until there's a crisis. We don't want to wait until there's a problem that has to be addressed. We want to go ahead and address these as soon as we can, in a way that enables us to start putting a plan in place for the best possible care for the person that we care so much about. We talk about wanting to develop a plan that definitely uses finesse. Or I like to tell people, you want a plan that just is full of gracious, loving kindness. Remember, this is someone that we care about, who's having the cognitive issues. This is someone that we want the best for. So we want to make sure that we're using a lot of finesse in getting this conversation. So, think if we were on the receiving end of this information, it can be pretty hard to hear. It can be pretty devastating to have to come to the realization, that, gosh, I have a degenerative brain disease, and I'm going to be looking at a pathway forward of cognitive loss and all that entails. So that's a tough message to hear. So finesse is just a great word to think about. We want to ease into the conversation in a way that just shows our care and our concern and all the gracious, loving kindness that we can come up with. You got a great intro. If you're concerned about someone in your life, you can say, hey, I was on this Zoom program the other day and I heard some stuff. What do you think about this? We encourage a questioning approach instead of a sort of teaching or talking approach. Ask them, hey, what do you think about this? What would you want to happen if this was going on in your life? And just kind of ease in to the conversation. We encourage people always to take notes. If you're talking about loved one, it's your spouse, it's your mom or dad who you think you're seeing some cognitive changes that are concerning you. Take some notes so you have some context and a timeline, and ask others to. If it's your mom's, ask your siblings, hey, are you seeing any of this? Can you kind of take note of when you see this, so that we can begin to sort of get a record of what's going on, so we can have that information to help us see if there is a problem. And these notes that we take, this will help us have that conversation. We don't want to think about these conversations for sure like an intervention. This is not like when we're sitting someone down because we think they need to go to rehab. It's not that kind of conversation. It's more like a conversation where we say, hey, mom, I've noticed this. Dad, I've noticed this. And I statements are much better than you statements. We don't want to say, Dad, you wrecked the car, or Dad, you forgot to pay the mortgage, or Dad. We want to say I statements. Oh, I've noticed that you're struggling to keep up with your bills. Can we talk about that? Or I noticed that you had some trouble with the car. Is that something we can talk about? When you phrase it as sort of an I question, an I statement, it's much less sort of in your face. It's much less offensive, it's much easier sometimes for the person to hear it. Practice in advance. We want to make sure that we know exactly what we're trying to accomplish. We don't want it in the heat of the moment. We want to make sure that we've given some context to it and some thought to it. And then definitely want these conversations to take place when everyone involved is relaxed and comfortable. We don't want it in the middle of a crisis. We want it to take place before the crisis. We want it to be, at a time and a place where this loved one, this person we care so much about, that we want to have this conversation, that we know that they're going to be relaxed, they're going to be comfortable. There's the best chance of them being open and willing to sort of hear some of these things. So the first one we're going to talk about a little bit is about going to the doctor. There can be some barriers to this first step of going to the doctor. This is fear. What if they find something? What if they come back and say, hey, you have some mild cognitive impairment. There's something going on that needs to be addressed. There could be anger that someone is kind of getting in your business. That a child or a spouse are sort of overstepping their boundaries. And there is still, among some people, a stigma to dementia. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to really give voice to that thing that they're scared of. So these can all keep us from getting a good diagnosis and from getting the medical help that we really need. Let's hear from Donna about getting help.
I think you have to be honest. I think that's the important thing with it. To get a loved one to the doctor, I think you just need to be candid and honest of what are you trying to do. We're trying to understand what we're up against. It's just so important to do that, because you can't battle something that you don't know what you're battling. Again, it may not have been Alzheimer's, it could have been depression, it could have been so many other things. And guess what? There's other things you can do to take care of those issues as well. But that's what you need to be able to do. You can't ignore something. It's not going to go away.
Right. And she made a great point that, we may see what we think is a cognitive problem with a loved one that is caused by something that can be addressed. Sometimes if a person is older and their thyroid gets way out of whack, their thyroid level or their B12 level gets way out of whack, they'll exhibit some symptoms that mimic dementia. And so that's why it's important to get to the doctor and find out, hey, is this something that can be dealt with that's not dementia? I know older women sometimes will get a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and the process of the infection and then the heavy antibiotics will really cause sometimes a couple of months of real cognitive issues. And you'll think, oh my gosh, mom has got dementia. It's like, no, she's just struggling to recover from a really serious UTI. And so it's important to get to the doctor, get the ball rolling, and find out if there's something else going on that can be addressed. And as going forward from this point, now that we've entered sort of the what we call the era of treatment with Alzheimer's and dementia, we have the first class of drugs coming on board now to actually go in and address the mechanism, what's going on with the disease. It's important for us to get that diagnosis as early as possible, because all of the drugs that have been approved to this point, Aduhelm, Leqembi, and we have a third one about to be approved, they're only effective very early in Alzheimer's. And so we need to, get to the doctor, get a good diagnosis, and see if there's something that we can do about that. As we're having that conversation about going to the doctor, use words that are most comfortable. One good approach has been suggested is when we're talking about going to deal with this, talk about the symptoms and not the disease. Don't say, oh, I need to go check and see if you've got Alzheimer's. You need to go see if you've got dementia. No, it's easier to sort of swallow and to take. You say, hey, mom, let's go talk to the doctor about that you're forgetting stuff. Let's go talk to the doctor that you're not as, sort of into it in managing the household as you used to be. It's much less of a struggle. It's much less offensive sometimes if you're talking about the symptoms instead of the scary, scary thing, dementia and Alzheimer's that's out there. A great suggestion, Medicare's free annual wellness visit. If you're on Medicare after 65, you get this free annual wellness visit. you can say, hey, Dad, remember Medicare really wants you to check in with your doctor every year. And then you can go and talk to the physician or whoever's giving the appointment beforehand and say, we need a cognitive discussion. You get Montreal, I forget the name of it. There's a test they can give that's a cognitive test. I think it's 11 questions, takes about a half hour. That's a great sort of starting point, and they will do that if you ask for it. So you can go and talk to the doctor beforehand and say, when we come in, we've got some cognitive concerns. Can you go ahead and put down the list of things to talk about? Um, Great strategy. Pair the visit with something enjoyable. If you know your loved one is just having a lot of stress or concern or anxiety about, just broaching this subject and talking to the doctor, say, hey, Mom, it's okay, Mom. We're going to talk to the doctor, but then we're going to be downtown anyway. We'll go out and get a bite to eat. Kind of pair it with something that makes it a little bit easier to take and a little more enjoyable. Invite other family members to communicate concerns and questions to the doctor. Make a list. If you've been taking notes, this is a great thing to bring. Get other family members involved. Once again, we want to not make this seem like an intervention. We want to make this seem like these are people who are concerned, who are bringing their concerns and their care to the equation to help their loved one. Remember, this is also at this stage, make sure with your loved one that you've got all the proper HIPAA releases done at this point. Make sure that your doctor is set up with permission to talk to you about what they find with your loved one. Make sure you've got all those forms signed, and they know what to do at the doctor's office, but make sure you're on the list so that something happens, they have legal permission to share that information with you. And then we have something else we call the therapeutic fib that sometimes we use if we just can't get our loved one to make that step for whatever reason, because they're scared of the dementia diagnosis, because they're scared of what they know is going on. Folks in the early stages, when they have mild cognitive impairment or the early stages of Alzheimer's, I mean, they can tell that something has changed, and we see them withdrawing from activities and doing compensating things. So they know, so they may be very reluctant because this is a scary thing. Or if they just don't want to go, sometimes we can use what's called the therapeutic fib, which is just kind of, a way to get them there. So, hey, Mom, gosh, I don't want to go. I know you don't want to go see the doctor. I don't want to do this either. It's going to be such a hassle to go down there and park and everything. But, we've got to go see him to get your prescriptions refilled, or something like that. I think this is a stupid thing, but, the insurance people say we've got to go see your doctor every year. It's okay to use a little therapeutic fib if that's what's needed to kind of get the ball rolling and get that going. All right, talk a little bit about driving. This is a big one because when we talk about when to stop driving for our loved one, we're getting into issues of independence and autonomy. And this is getting into things that really, really cut close to home for most people when you talk about their independence and their autonomy as a person. But, if we've seen these things, if we've noticed, hey, there's been little fender benders, or Dad used to keep the car perfect, and now there's little scrapes where he's been scraping, getting in and out of the driveway and out of the garage, or, the traffic tickets that indicate not paying attention to what's going on, or get to the point where our loved one is getting lost in familiar locations. Instead of they forget how to get home from the church. They forget how to get over to a friend's house that they've been going to for 30 years. When we see these things, that's when we know we need to have that conversation.
There's no exact answer on this is when you stop driving. You could tell when coming up to an intersection, as an example, the ability to understand what's going on around you was starting to deteriorate a little bit. Being on the highway with cars on both sides becomes a little bit more difficult. And first and foremost, the safety of everybody in the car as well as other drivers on the road. You think about that, and you want to make sure you're not putting anybody in danger. But then the difficult part is telling your dad, who you love, and he loves driving, and he's used to it, that he can no longer do that. But then even then, taking the keys away full time was very difficult. The doctor was very helpful in just saying, medically, you can't do this anymore. But my mother had the hardest time with this. because she knew how much this was going to hurt him as well. And this is one of the first things that we had to deal with as a family when it came to telling my dad that he had to stop doing something because of this disease. That meant a lot to him.
It's like this is something. It's a tough conversation. It's independence. It's autonomy. It's a big part of who a person is. One great strategy is to plan ahead. And we talk about having these conversations before there's an issue. This is a great time to do that. And this works whether you're worried about a loved one with dementia or not, because everyone, as they get older, has some loss of cognitive, physical abilities and things like that. A good idea. Go ahead and have a conversation with your loved one and say, hey, you tell me at what point do you think we should be concerned, and let them kind of define the conditions. Let them say, hey, you say, Dad, at what point would you want us to tell you to stop driving, and let them sort of define it. Well, when I can't do this, when I can't do this, and sort of let them go ahead and lay that out so that you're able to go back to that later and say, Dad, you told us when we started to see things that we thought were dangerous, you'd agree to give up your keys. So maybe even a driving contract is a way to go. Be very specific when you come to them with all that love and concern and kindness and graciousness. You've got notes. Be very specific. Hey, Mom, we know you love to drive your car, but we noticed last week you almost got hit coming out of the driveway because you weren't paying attention, and we've noticed some other things, and have those specific examples. Appeal to that person's sense of responsibility and concern for others, and this probably is might really work well with I think with men, but with women also, where you say, Mom, Dad, we want to make sure that we're not putting other people in danger. However you can say that they would accept that. Hey, Mom, you wouldn't want someone else's family to be in danger because you're not able to be as attentive as you used to be. Sometimes that's a good strategy to you draw on their sense of concern.
Some tips on having the conversation is pointing out, especially for my father, the potential danger to others that it may cause if he's behind the wheel. And just talking about it from the standpoint that this is not only the best thing for you, but this is also the best thing for others around you. And these are some of the alternatives, making sure that this is what's going to happen, having a plan. If Mom can't take you, then Uncle Thomas or will be here to take you, and we will make sure that you're getting out of the house and that you're doing some things. So, presenting the bad news, but then also presenting the plan. And for my father, that's really, really important to have a plan.
That's a great strategy that Sheila mentioned there, is have a plan. If you get to the point where you feel like you need to say to your loved one, hey, it's time. We really need to take your keys. You don't need to be driving, but have a plan and say, but don't worry, Mom, because half the time you already ride with Miss Smith to church anyway, and she said you can ride with her to church, and and Miss So and So said she'll pick you up for bridge on Tuesday, and I'll come over. We'll keep doing what we've done, and every Thursday evening we'll run to the grocery store. Have a plan in place so it doesn't feel like they're totally losing that independence and that autonomy that is so important. And then another strategy, incorporate the voice of a esteemed professional. Sometimes you get your doctor involved. And in my experience, physicians understand that sometimes they need to be the heavy, that they need to be the person who brings the bad news. Talk to your doctor behind the scenes. Hey, we're concerned about Dad's driving. We're concerned about Mom's driving. And often, hearing it from an authority is much easier to take than hearing it from a child. For the doctor to say, hey, it's time. It's time. You've lost some, of your ability to, really be safe on the road, and we think it's time for you to come up with a different plan. A lot of people don't realize that there are some things that go on with eyesight and such with dementia that interfere with driving. And we think about loss of cognitive ability. As you move into the early stages of dementia and then deeper into dementia, you lose a lot of your peripheral vision. You begin to have trouble with depth perception. So it is important for us to consider how those impact us and our abilities.
Talking to somebody about stopping driving, I think it's most important to understand that that is tied to someone's independence more than most things. And so by saying you can't do this anymore is like telling the person, it's like ripping away their independence. And that doesn't feel good for anybody. I, I know that I've always tried to put myself in that situation. What would I think if someone was saying this to me? You don't get to do this anymore. And how would I feel? And how would I want somebody to talk to me about this? And so if you try to put, I think sometimes too many people try to approach it as, very punitive. And I'm doing what's right for you. So why don't you understand, without really turning the tables and putting themselves in that position, understanding, how helpless that feels to take those things away. It's important to be thoughtful about what that experience is like for the individual.
Right. One thing I did want to point out this here, if you go to our website, alz.org, in the search bar, you can put in driving resources, and there are some tips and things that you can use, some videos that might help you with this conversation and kind of help you decide, hey, if this is the right time and then how to do it. So alz.org, and just type in driving resources in the search bar, and it's got some things there that might help. All right, now we want to talk about some legal and financial planning. And these have some similarities to this conversation about when to stop driving, because we're getting into those issues of independence and autonomy and all of these things that sort of make us a person and an adult. And not everyone is, not every parent or spouse is super excited to share all this information with others, with other people. Sometimes this is seen as very private information, but it's critical if we're going to move into a caregiving role that we have this information.
Financially, this disease will increase the cost of living. It's just a fact. So planning for those extra costs is that much more important than what you were planning for before. And so you have to review everything that's in place, see what changes need to be made, both legally and financially, and you have to monitor that going forward afterwards too.
As we look at these issues of legal and financial planning, we run into, if we're dealing especially with our parents, maybe some reluctance, they're uncomfortable, it feels intrusive, feels disrespectful. I like the way Dave Ramsey, the financial advisor, puts it. He calls it the powdered butt syndrome. You don't want to take advice or instruction from someone who you powdered their butt when they were a baby. So sometimes it's hard to get that conversation going, but it's an essential conversation, and it's definitely one you want to have as early as possible. A great strategy for this is to let your loved one, whether it's your spouse or your parents especially, let them know, hey, if I'm going to be with you in this journey, I'm going to be there, caring for you, because I do care about you and I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. I want to do everything the way you want it. So I need for you to give me all this information as much as I can get, and I need you to tell me what you want your care to look like. That's a gift that you can give to me so that I can make sure going forward that your care is done in the way that you want it.
Here's what I've come to after all of this. That it's the most loving and kind thing you can do for them is to be honest with them and say, this is like a really scary thing. And I feel a lot of discomfort bringing this up to you, but I tell them, if you're going to be the one who's going to take them on this journey, then you have to tell them, I'm going to be here on this journey with you. And there are things that we have to do to get this in place. We're going to go on this journey together. I've told you I'm going to be here with you till the end. So let's get this ready. It's like we're going to go on an ocean ship. We've got to get things packed up. We've got to figure out what we're taking with us. We got to get ready. And the things that we have to get ready, we have to make sure that we know which doctors you're going to be using. I need to get this signed, okay? So that if you go in there and they have to do surgery, for example, I got to have this durable power of attorney for health care for you. I have to have this worked out, okay? Now, if for some reason, okay, you need to go to rehab after something, I have to have these documents here, the financial stuff, so I can get these things taken care of for you while this is going on. I don't want to have anything get in the way of us being able to progress and keep doing this. I said, it seems hard because it's hard in our heads. You know, everybody's heard, read about people who've stolen from elderly people, who've done these horrible things. But if you're the person who's approaching this with loving kindness and compassion, and you're willing to take this person on this journey, you're not doing a bad thing. You're doing the right thing by talking to them about it. And you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. We're going to do this together, and I'm going to help you through this. And these are the tools that I need to make sure that we can do this.
Nice. You made some great points, and that is always a concern for folks. It's like, gosh, am I giving up control? And we've all heard the horror stories of people who have essentially stolen from old people. But you can point out by telling your loved one, by them taking the steps to put these pieces in place, they're actually helping to protect themselves, because while they're still able, they're defining how their resources, assets, care, and everything are going to take place. But as you said, explain that you're in this together. You and whoever comprises the care team. Whether it's hopefully it's not just one person. Hopefully you've got a support system of friends and family. That you're in this together, and this is something you're going to do together. And by getting these things in place, power of attorney, other things, it's a way that you can ensure the best care for them, ensure that they get the care they want, and ensure that you're spending less time on legal issues down the road and more time on care because you put the pieces in place. You start by asking the questions and gathering the documents. Once again, sooner than later, get all this in place. Want to make sure while the person is still cognitively able, they're able to lay out what they have. And this is a disease that can be fairly expensive if you're looking down the road at having to go into memory care or things like that. So you want to get all that information as early as possible to know what's available, what are the assets, what are the plans, what are the possibilities. Explaining these are standard plans. These have to be done. Everyone has to do them as they get older. Unfortunately, you may have to do them at a different time, an earlier time, because you're thinking there's a dementia diagnosis. This is a big one. Break the conversation into parts. This may not be one conversation. This may be a whole lot of conversations. And your loved one, their personality, their concerns, how they operate. And so okay, this is my dad we're talking about. He's a little bit stubborn, so this is going to be a long journey. And it might be that, okay, hey, Dad, this week, why don't we go ahead and go, let's go talk to the attorney. Let's go ahead and just talk about this idea of power of attorney, and he can explain that to you, and we'll get some documents in place. And that's all you do in the first step. And then a week or two later, you're like, hey, Dad, let's go out to lunch. And while we're out, let's stop by the bank, get me signed on to the safety deposit box. Show me what documents you have in there. So if a question ever comes up, I know where they are, and then wait a few weeks later. Hey, Dad, why don't we go talk to Mr. Smith? He's been your insurance guy for so long, and just kind of get an idea of what's going on out there, and make sure that you've got all the paperwork in place for those who are going to receive benefits and things like that. It may be a whole series of conversations that you just have to use kind of your experience of how your loved one operates to come up with a plan. And then involve others as needed. Find those family members, friends, doctors, pastors who can be a help in this, who can be a part of putting this plan together, moving this conversation forward, because it is some sensitive information, sensitive areas, and get everything in place. Let's talk about the idea of a care team. We mentioned that a little bit already. Really encourage people as you move into having a family member or a loved one who's looking at a dementia diagnosis. This can be very, very hard on the caregiver. So we want to think in terms of not just a caregiver, but a care team. incorporating all of the family. Sometimes this gets tricky because of family dynamics. We all, we're not all the Brady Bunch. All of our families are different. We have, siblings with different opinions, and we have aunts and uncles and spouses, and so we have people who bring different pieces to the table. So we need to think in terms of a care team and how all those people are going to relate together. Once again, this is why it's better to have those conversations sooner than later, because we don't want to wait until there's a crisis and we have everyone bringing their opinions and their emotion and their issues into the middle of a crisis situation while we have to make critical decisions. So if we can have these conversations before we hit the crisis, we can let everyone see, okay, here's how I can contribute to the care team. Here's who's going to be the primary caregiver. Here's how I'm going to offer a support role, and we can get that care team in place. But outside the care team, think of this as sort of rings. Outside of our immediate care team, we're going to have a medical team, and that is all the folks who are going to be involved in medical care, from our regular physician to then if we're talking to specialists, to then if we're going into a care facility, the team there. And so let's go ahead and think before things, really hit a crisis point. Who is our medical team? What resources do we have there? And then beyond that, and this is a big thing for both the person receiving care and for the caregiver, peers can be a tremendous resource. If you're the caregiver, you definitely need a peer group to give you support. If you are the person receiving care, you often have a great network, you neighbors and people like that who can be part of your care team. Workplace, boy, this is great for caregivers. Check with your workplace. People sometimes don't realize that they have resources available through their workplace. For example, in my organization, we get time off, and it's called, I think it's called adult care, family care. We have a category like that where we have some time built in that we can take off from work that's not charged against our vacation. And some resources like that. So check in your workplace. You may have resources for time off, for legal planning assistance, for all kinds of things that might help you in your role as caregiver. And then community resources. One thing that we really emphasize is, when you don't have to face this alone. There are tons of resources in your community. You start with your faith community and work out from there. There's organizations like the Alzheimer's Association and the things we offer. There's the Area Agency on Aging and the things that they offer and can contribute. So there are resources available that you can find to assist you in your caregiving. Do want to share some of the things that we have available. One thing I really kind of harp on every time I get in front of a group is our helpline number, that 800-272-3900. I want to share that far and wide. That is 24 hours a day. Whoever answers the phone has at least a master's level of education dealing with dementia. There is no question too off the wall or too bizarre, and anybody can call it. Even if you don't have someone who's currently undergoing a struggle with dementia, you could call tonight and go, okay, I heard this guy talking about dementia. I have no idea what he was talking about, and they'll talk you through it. Or if you're a caregiver and you can call at 3 a.m. and say, hey, my father, he's having some struggles. He's never acted this way before. And they'll give you a couple of tips that'll get you through until the morning when you can call your doctor. So it's a great resource we want to put out there in front of as many people as possible. Other than that, we have a great website with great resources on there. We have a community resource finder that you can go on and put in your zip code, and it'll tell you if there's support groups or things in the area. We have lots of our training videos are available on the alz.org. So we have a lot of resources that are available. And of course, we're a volunteer-driven nonprofit. We're always looking for folks who want to get involved as advocates, volunteers. Trial Match. Trial Match is a great opportunity for those who have a dementia diagnosis. You go from being someone with a diagnosis to someone who is empowered to move the needle forward. You can go into Trial Match. It's alz.org/trial match and put in your zip code, and it'll tell you if there's a research trial in your area you might get participate in. And so it's a great way for you to not feel like you're a victim of this terrible disease, but instead you're moving the needle in a positive direction in the research. So once again, form a care team, bring the whole family in, have the conversation as early as possible. Put all the pieces in place as early as possible so that then you put the structure in place. You can be concerned with giving care, taking care of your loved one, and not have to worry about all these other things. There's the helpline number. So stop the share. All right, awesome. We ran through, I know in about 45 minutes, a ton of information. But if you have questions, we've got a few minutes. I'll be glad to take any questions that anyone has.
Okay, floor is open. Anybody with any questions?
I always figure when you don't get any questions, it means either you did a great job or you did a terrible job. It's one of the two. So anyway, no, but that's okay. I have really enjoyed being with you. I do want to say, and I will, where is the chat? All right, you got the helpline also. I am going to drop my email, in the chat. Should have done that earlier. And if you have specific questions or things, wrong email. If you have anything that you want to ask me personally, maybe anything you didn't want to ask during the session, something you think of later, please feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to talk to you. If you have a question on where to find resources, anything we've talked about, any follow-up, just feel free to email me and I will follow up with you as soon as I can, as best as I can.
Okay. Now, I do have a question, and this goes back to developing the plan. And also, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit in the next session as well about the finances.
Mm-hmm.
But does the 24/7 helpline provide any information that can help someone who is actually trying to now navigate, put in the power of attorney and all those things in place?
I don't know how much specific information they can give you, but they can talk about kind of what the categories are and what they need. And you are right. The next session, the December session, and Patty Jumbo's doing that one. Yeah, that's going to talk a lot about those issues. That's going to talk a lot about what exactly you do need to put in place, legal forms, categories, things like that. So yeah, that will be a little bit deeper dive next session.
Okay. Yeah, one of the conversations that I hear often is that that is the hardest part for a lot of people, knowing how to go about putting those things in place, the power of attorney, making sure the will is in place, especially you hear, well, I don't want them to think that I'm trying to kill them if
Sure.
if I start asking about the will and all those different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the key, the main question that I get.
And family dynamics play a lot into it. Some families are very open with their finances and resources and things like that. And some families, the parents may hold that information very tightly. But that's why we encourage. That may be a conversation that takes a while, that takes several steps. And so start it early, and just a great approach of saying I'm doing this, not because I want your money, mom, not because I'm trying to put you in the nursing home, mom, but because I want to make sure that I have the information I need to take care of you the way you want to be taken care of. It's a gift you can give to me, because if I know this stuff, then I can do what you want with your care going forward. So it's it just make it positive. Don't be afraid, to take a long time with it. Sometimes these things, have to just kind of percolate and develop a little bit. Little baby steps, one at a time. But this is something that it's important, and it's going to happen eventually. So it's better for it to happen before the crisis than have to be taken care of in the middle of the crisis.
Very true. Very true. Any other questions from those who are attending? If you would prefer that I stop the recording before you ask your questions, feel free to raise your hand so I'll know that, and I can go ahead and stop the recording so you can ask your questions.
Of course, like I said, I dropped my email in the chat. You can drop me a direct question about anything we've talked about or anything that has come up in any of the other sessions, and I'll try and get you some information.
Okay. Now, if there are no other questions, we are not going to try to hold Billy on. He'll be able to have that sometime this afternoon.
All right, and y'all don't forget to change your clocks back tonight.
Yes, at 2 a.m. we go back an hour. So I just want to say thank you so much to Billy Curtis for taking the time to come and share this information. As I mentioned earlier, this is part 5 of a 6-part series. So our next session will be the first Saturday of December, which is December the 2nd or 7th. In my head, I thought I had it, and then I'm not so sure anymore. But December the
2nd.
Yes. Okay. So my brain did remember it right. Okay. So December the 2nd is the next session, and we'll be looking at the managing money component. So that's the first Saturday of December. I hope that you will be able to join us. And we invite you to also share that information with others so that they will be able to get as much information as possible and be able to minister to their loved ones and others with love, empathy, and also informed, knowledgeable about what needs to occur. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity you provide this afternoon. Father, you blessed Billy to be clear. You blessed him to provide the information, dear Lord, in a way that was not only succinct, but, dear Father, give us strategies and step-by-step instructions on the things that we can do to ensure that we minister in a manner that is pleasing in your sight. Father, we ask that you will continue to be with him and continue to be with each person on this line. And Lord, give us patience. Most of all, dear Father, help us to grow in you and thereby be able to share your love and your mercy and your grace with others. And Lord, until we meet again, please keep us safe. And dear Father, keep us committed to serving you in all things. In Jesus' precious name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
And beloved, as they say, I wish that you will prosper and be in good health as your soul prospers. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And Billy, thank you once again. I look forward to seeing you prayerfully in person sometime soon.
That'd be great. All right. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Good to be with
we
y'all
thank
tonight.
you. In case you're wondering, you did an excellent job. It wasn't so it's not the B part, you know. You did a good job. And yes, we're looking forward to the other session in December because you know, that might be very important to know how to proceed as far as finances is concerned. As we are getting older, the